Hi, and welcome to Talking with Tapolci. I'm your host, Jason Tapolci. In previous episodes, we've been speaking about the scaling cycle that all businesses go through. And in a nutshell, that was your growth, delivery, and support phases. And I invited key members of the VoIP Innovations team down in past episodes to talk about their particular phase and how to move the choke point from their phase to the next phase in the chain. And this week, I thought it would be nice to wrap everything up by having a question and answer session, and where I invited all the members down that we had in the past 4 or 5 episodes to talk to us and answer some questions that I have for them. And so I'd like to welcome Sebastian Kiley, who is our product manager, Natalie DiCario, who is our marketing manager. Then we have Tim Lynn, the lead engineer, and Randy Stegner, who is our operations manager. I want to get started today by asking Sebastian Kiley a little bit about the scaling cycle itself. And I know that VoIP Innovations has had some success over the recent years. And do you think that the scaling process, the scaling cycle, has anything to do with that success?
Absolutely. With a company of our size, efficiency is a key skill set to have within each group, with the management team in general. My job as the product manager, as you mentioned before, is to make sure that a process, as it goes through each and every one of the cycles, gets worked on, it gets moved on to the next process. So I'd be the one potentially to identify some of the things that may slow us down. So, for example, we came up with a 25-cent DID promotion. My job was to make sure that this idea that came from the senior management got down to Tim's group. Tim builds the product, gets to Natalie, she markets the product, and then eventually gets to Randy, and his team needs to inevitably support the product. So with a company of our size, I think what makes us so successful is the efficiency, as I mentioned. And I think that comes down to our core values. Again, that comes from the senior leadership.
And he brings up an important couple words there, core values and belief systems. And I believe in any company that's your foundation, that's your soul, okay? And that's where everything begins. So, if you haven't developed your core values or nailed them down or have a solid belief system that the entire company is on board with, I recommend doing that first before even moving on to anything else. So in talking about brand promise, okay, that's part of strategy. That's strategic thinking. Once you have your core values and your vision, we want to go into what is our vision, what is our brand promise. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that and what VoIP Innovations?
Sure. For VoIP Innovations, our brand promise is saving our customers time through choice, automation, and control. So everything we do in the marketing department boils down to making sure that our customers know they have choice, automation, control with everything that we have to offer to them. Like Sebastian mentioned with the 25-cent DID promo, we're giving our customers the choice that they can buy DIDs for 25 cents on the new tier that Tim created. And everything that we're doing is just promoting the fact that we're just there to help them and make their lives easier, because they want everything needs to be automated. And it's just really promising our customers that we can deliver these things to them.
So, in your world, we said it's very strategic. And if I had to pick a word, it's communication, for you guys. Could you just talk a little bit about communication and how important it is for all the phases to communicate with each other in order to deliver a product that was promised by the growth team?
Right. Communication is key. If you don't have it, then you can't really do anything else. It starts off with you have to talk to your senior management, figure out what you actually want to do, and then you have to work with support and delivery to make sure that you're all on the same page. If I don't know that we're getting ready to launch a product, then I can't market it. If Randy in support doesn't know that we actually launched the product, they can't support it. So it's just a very key factor in everything.
So Tim, would you agree that communication, it's not just important for the growth phase, but communication in general, tell me how that affects your world.
Yeah, absolutely. The beginning of any new product, from where I stand, comes from the communication from our growth team, telling us that they would like to sell a product that fits these specifications. We have to go in and continue to communicate with them, saying, okay, this stuff we can do, this stuff we can't do, and then work out something that as close to their original vision as possible. From there, we go in and create it, and our next job as far as communication is concerned is passing it along to Randy and his team and allowing him to tell us what his team will need in terms of tools to actually support that particular process.
So you're right in the middle. You're taking this strategy, this vision, these promises, you're building a product that's going to be delivered. And then Randy, as he said, you're doing what?
Well, once it passes from Tim to support, we have to maintain that communication that we've all talked about here. We want to make sure that the internal teams are all on the same page, but also we still have to communicate to the outside world, to our customers. But the next step of that is the process, and we want to ensure that we are refining our processes. So, for example, the 25-cent DID promotion. Sure, we're used to porting numbers, but now we've created something new here, and we therefore want to, we may have to refine that process. It's something new, so we're going to have to go in and make an adjustment. It's slightly different. The important thing with processes, though, in refining them is that's the key word. You want to be able to refine them. You don't want to write them in stone and kind of dig your heels in and say, hey, this is the way we do it. You're always refining them because you want to make them as efficient as possible.
In your communication, there's growth, delivery, and support. Randy in support, he's communicating not with just within the support phase, but he's also communicating with the delivery and the growth phases. So, it's important to note that you have to communicate all the way around the circle. And if you don't, what ends up happening, the choke point stays at that particular phase. So you had mentioned, you were talking about processes. I'm just kind of interested in general from a strategic or a growth phase. How does processes impact you guys?
Processes from the growth perspective, it's really a lot with dealing with leads and how we handle them, because we have our forms on our landing pages. They click call to actions, go to landing pages, fill out a form. Once we get those leads, they have to be passed off to sales so they know how to nurture them and lead them down the conversion path to actually become a customer. And dealing with that process and making sure that there's no hiccups or choke points in anywhere where people are getting stuck. It's all a process that, like Randy said, needs to be refined constantly to make sure that you're capturing everybody.
And it's from the delivery standpoint, then, talking about process, how does that relate to you guys?
From a very generic overview, the delivery process starts with the communication from our sales team, our growth team. And then from there, we go through a process of vetting that particular item between figuring out development time for it, its actual worth to the company, and just feasibility within our current constraints. And from there, we go through the normal testing process throughout the course of the development, and then we have a process to hand it off to the operations team.
Who signs off on it?
Correct.
So we had mentioned efficiencies. I believe it might have been, no, it was actually Sebastian. You mentioned efficiencies. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have those efficiencies from being very agile in a market? There's a lot of companies that grow so big that it's hard to turn an aircraft carrier versus a speedboat. And so can you talk just briefly about efficiencies and how important that is to a company?
Sure. With a big company, obviously, there's a lot of bureaucracy that goes into any decision, any new product. We're a small company, 55 employees, and at any moment you could come up with an idea, we could table it. Before the end of the day, Tim's already starting to work on it. You're not going to find that type of efficiency with a bigger company. I think that's what separates us from our competition. We're able to readily create new products and adapt to the industry like that.
And as far as the efficiencies on the delivery side, there is a method called the Scrum, which is Scrum. It's delivering products in smaller increments and chunks. And I just wanted to have Tim talk a little bit about the efficiencies in the Scrum management style.
Certainly, a lot of development teams like doing large releases, which have many different feature sets associated with them. We're more focused on finding a single feature and delivering that feature, and then moving on to the next feature and delivering that feature. It helps us get out features a lot quicker. It doesn't go through the long production feature product that most other companies go through.
And there was an example I read. I think it was a manufacturer developing a camera, and what they did was they spent all this time and effort to develop this camera. And when the camera got released, they realized that when you went to take the picture, your finger was in front of the shutter, so you had to hold the camera a very weird way. And so, and that's because they probably built a spec that was, here's what it's going to be, and some team developed that entire spec, not realizing that the finger would be in front of the shutter. So to Tim's point, it's so important to, if you have a big project, break it down into smaller pieces and complete smaller pieces. I bet you, if that company would have done that, they would have realized that they had a bad physical positioning of the shutter and on the fingers. Over the past few episodes, we've been discussing the scaling cycle, and I hope that was informative for all of you. But before we leave, I just wanted to ask each one of these members if they could leave us with some parting advice about their particular phase. And so, Randy, is there any advice you would like to give to our viewers?
Sure. My advice would be to think of the support cycle as supporting your entire company. Oftentimes people think of support as help desk support, and while that's certainly part of it, it is much larger than that. In the support phase, I am supporting the growth and delivery teams. So that's really how you want to view it. In addition to that, you're also supporting your customers. So there's a lot of components to support, so don't get bogged down into thinking it's only one element.
Right, that's good advice. And Tim, from the delivery phase of the scaling cycle, what advice do you have?
Really, the biggest advice that I can give is to not build a product and then try to sell it. The operations or the support and the growth team are a lot closer to the intended market than the delivery team. So they should really be the ones telling us what we need to build, what the customers want. The delivery team should never, assume that they know what the customer wants. We really need that feedback from the other two departments.
And I believe in our episode when I invited Tim down, we spoke about not putting the delivery phase at the top of the triangle, which most companies do. And I think he was referencing Field of Dreams there. So thanks, Tim. And then Natalie, from the growth perspective and the growth phase, what advice do you have for us?
To really understand what pain points your customers are facing and then answer them with a differentiator in your product. You want them to know that they can come to you and have all their problems solved. Without listening to your customers and really understanding what they need, you can't develop a product that's going to stand out from everybody else.
If there's no pain, there's no problem to solve. And and if there is a pain, you better have a good differentiator, or else you're going to keep competing on price, which is a commodity type business. And then finally, Sebastian, from a product manager standpoint, is there any advice you want to pass along to us?
Well, I think with my role in the cycle, I think accountability is probably the most important attribute that we're looking for. That initiative within each particular group to get their stuff done and moved on. So I'd say accountability, initiative, two main focuses.
Very good. So that wraps up this series on the scaling cycle. And I want to thank everybody for watching and thank all you guys for joining us today. And we'll be back again next week with some new and exciting topics. My name's Jason Tapolci. This is Talking with Tapolci.